Hello, listeners. Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a moment to tell you about another show on our podcast network that I co-host called Higher Ed Pulse. Higher Ed Pulse is your weekly spotlight on the latest in higher education marketing and enrollment. From headline news to social posts, insider insights to industry observations, join yours truly and Seth Odell as we share top stories from across the world of higher education. Each bite-sized 15-minute episode is packed with personality and designed to bring what's top of mind to the top of your feed. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Higher Ed Pulse wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Breaking Silos, a podcast that shines a light on the incredible partnerships happening across campuses every day. I'm your host, Shane Baglini from Muhlenberg College. Join me every 2 weeks for discussions with some of the best minds in higher ed marketing, enrollment management, student affairs, campus leadership, and more. Breaking Silos is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Welcome to Breaking Silos, where today my guests are from the University of Arizona, and we will be talking about TEDxUArizona. I think we're all familiar with TEDx and its mission and the valuable content that folks can get from that. So I'm really excited to hear how this came together. We are talking to Emily Stolz, Director of Social Media at University of Arizona, and Joe Klug, Assistant Director of the Experience Team in the Central Marketing Office at the University of Arizona. Emily and Joe, thank you both so much for being with me.
Thanks for having us.
Super excited to chat.
I am too, because I'm a big fan of TEDx events and series. And so I'm excited to not only that you're able to work on a cool project like this, but I'm excited to kind of get a look at how it came together. And I want to start with that. And Joe, I will start with you on this. If you could just kind of walk us through how this came about, the process of getting this sort of to bringing this to life, and then how you kind of worked with the team at both TEDx and University of Arizona to get this going.
The interesting part is that TEDx had been on our campus before. So under the moniker of TEDx U of A, which was kind of owned and operated by students. And so it was a student group and it had kind of been passed through the university a little bit. And so once COVID hit, the students who had been working with it had kind of graduated. It was no longer really there anymore. And so, working with my partner in crime, as I like to call her, the executive director of the experience team, Misha Harrison, who I'm very lucky with, we started talking about it in 2022. Particularly, what would it look like to bring the program back to campus, but as a centrally funded and supported signature? And so the interesting part was in 2022, the Profit Brand Relevance Index had come out and actually had voted TED as being one of the top 10 most relevant brands in the US. And so what we discovered was that audiences for TED had kind of experienced a boom during the pandemic. And so once we started looking into it, it kind of became a no-brainer. What we talked with leadership about was top 10 most relevant brand. At the time, they had like 35.1 million subscribers. And so, our talks getting in front of that many eyeballs of a curated audience that's already looking for new, fresh ideas. We don't have to recreate the wheel and build that audience ourselves. We could tap into that brand. And then from there, kind of this idea of capacity building. So how do we work with researchers, scientists, faculty to talk to a more varied audience? So, we have a secret weapon in our arsenal of Diana Leonard, who is our speaker coach for the TEDx program, who's really incredible and is faculty and knows how to talk with them to kind of say, that's brilliant. I don't understand it. How can we work through it so that way everyone can tap into what you're saying? And so this idea of capacity building came about. So that was kind of where it all started. And then from there, it was working with central marketing communications leadership. We worked with the office of the provost, the executive office of the president, and our research impact and innovation team, an area which is our business enterprise of the university, to kind of support the funding for a 3-year pilot. What would this look like? How would we structure it? And I think that was the exciting part, was getting everyone on board for that 3-year pilot, which allowed us to kind of get it off the ground, test, see what's working, and kind of have different iterations to kind of figure out where are we going and how is it. Having that runway, I think, is really great. And then being able to get our thought leadership out there, because that's really the main goal of the program, is getting the research, the researchers, the faculty, the incredible talent that we have on this campus out in front of an international audience that's excited to hear about what we're doing.
Being such a large brand in higher ed, that the ability to reach that captive audience of 31 million people and, highlight thought leadership and research had to be really,
Mhm.
really exciting. And it sounds like this is a project that touched all areas of campus up to the office of the president.
It does. And the interesting part is that they're still growing. So I looked up this morning, they're now at 40.2
Wow.
million. So even from 2022 to like a year and a half later, we're looking at about 5 million in terms of subscribers that they've grown. And so I think that's the exciting part about the brand, is that it's evergreen content that doesn't go away and that continues to be watched over and over and over again the longer it's up there on the TEDx YouTube
Yeah,
channel.
and with a really strong brand behind it too. And you mentioned the
Mhm.
reputable brand piece of things. So, Emily, from your standpoint in the central marketing office and specifically social media, um, talk about what went into conversations about marketing this and taking advantage of this opportunity to get in front of so many people.
Yeah, so we wanted to really take a two-layer approach, essentially, in that obviously part of the promotion and marketing is leading up to the event and making sure that we have people there and that people are aware of what's happening, but also that making sure afterwards we're able to capitalize and continue to share those pieces and encourage our followers to engage with that content. Because obviously, whilst part of it is that in-person experience, it's also that ability, like Joe said, to utilize that TED brand and share it with people across the world and to make sure that we leverage our social accounts. So the first thing that Joe and I did when we looked at this was, what does this look like rolling out across our social and using internal email to our audience? Because we wanted to make sure that we really built up the hype on campus, but also that we were working from the framework of how do we leverage the flagship social account, so the University of Arizona, versus having all of these different areas try and chime in. So what we did is Joe and I worked together to build out a general framework about specific dates and platforms that we wanted to leverage. And then we were able to share that with our college partners, where the different faculty, speakers, and experts were coming from, so that they knew when to amplify and also to give them their own pieces so that they could specifically focus on leveraging their speaker versus TEDx as a whole.
Obviously, the University of Arizona is a huge, massive organization. And so this show, Breaking Silos, is talking about how did we work across campus to get this project launched. And Joe, you touched on it a little bit, but Emily, was there any work done behind the scenes in terms of sort of rallying other college or university communicators to get behind this?
Yes, a lot of Teams messages and a lot of emails, and making sure that we were just still in connection, especially when it comes to social. We know that we have to be fluid based on things that are happening, and TEDx was no exception to that system. So there were times where different messages needed to take priority, or maybe this was our priority and we were able to move some other things to make sure that we were matching the cadence of emails. So making sure that we were in close contact with everyone and making sure that when we shared things, even just something as simple as sharing the link so people knew exactly where to go. So we just shared this on Facebook. Here's the link, amplify it on your account, and here's some copy to go with it. Sometimes it's just as it seems simple, but sometimes that's the hardest part. It's just taking that mental load off of everyone and
Mhm.
being able to give them what they need so that they can succeed.
Yeah, I love what you just said there about taking that mental load off, because it is another project on people's plates. It's obviously a great opportunity and a great project, but it is. So I'm glad that you were kind of intentional about that, and that's good advice for others.
And I'm going to tag team off of that statement too, and the fact that a lot of it also was listening to the colleges, what did they need? So, there was often hey, I need something that's more square to be able to post on this, channel the way that I would like to post on this channel for my audience. And so a lot of it was also knowing that Emily and I were resources in that moment. So, oh, you need that graphic. Let us work on it. Let me talk to the graphic designer and get those cranked out. And it was one of those, when one person asked for it, we did it for all of them. It wasn't like, oh, this person wanted it for their speakers, so we'll do it for these speakers only. It was kind of along the way figuring out what's the toolbox that helps everyone do their jobs and make it easy.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, like to Emily's point, we're not asking people to make things up and create things. We're providing, here it is, just click reshare.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. Making things easier on people is a great way to get things done. I want to ask both of you, this was a big undertaking. What were some of the challenges that you came across, and how did you overcome them? And Joe, I'll start with you.
Oh, that's a great question.
I'm sure there were many,
right? I think the one that I'll talk about is the fact that the audience didn't exist for it. So TEDx U of A had existed on campus before, but it didn't have the following that we were hoping for. And so knowing that their last event was in 2019, by the time we did the first one in 2023, it had been 3 years. And so that was the big challenge, was figuring out who to talk to, when to talk to them, how do we engage with them. I think the first time we did it, we had a much smaller, more curated audience. And so we did a lottery system because there was like a limited 100 seats. And so, we had this massive original engagement of, oh, it's exciting, it's new, let's play. And then discovered, when translating that to a larger audience and a much larger space, where it was more ticket focused and less like, kind of, I'm going to say FOMO. The FOMO wasn't there as much on the second one. I think that was the interesting part, was really figuring out, how do we curate this audience, how do we tap into it. And so that's where I think Emily became super instrumental, in terms of, hey, knowing that we want this to be kind of grassroots social focused, who are campus partners that we can reach out to tap in. And so like Emily at one point was like, we need to get this in front of the honor students. It's there, like that's one of our target audiences. And so working with Emily to build that connection, get connected. And so I think that's where, the challenge was building that audience. And then how did I overcome it? I leaned on my brilliant partner, Emily, to really help figure out, who do we want to talk to? How do we want to talk to them? And so that ended up being, and the same thing rolled into alumni, it rolled into community. And so that's where figuring out flagship versus flagship, where who do we want to repost to, capture that audience, where Emily becomes really instrumental.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about FOMO, Emily, but I love what you just said, Joe, about that. That is a strong tool for this type of thing. TED Talks and TEDx do a really good job of creating an experience that when you watch it, it looks like I would like to be at that. So I mean, for this, it's a valuable tool. So Emily, from your standpoint, and sort of building up that audience that Joe just mentioned, what were some of your challenges?
Probably the fact that there wasn't anything comparable for us to base what we did off of. So obviously there are big events that are mainstays at every college campus: homecoming, athletic events, commencement, but everyone has them, and you have rule books, whether they're publicized or not, in terms of like, okay, we want to get RSVPs open by this date. Here's the best way to engage students. Here's the way that we found that's the best way to get RSVPs. But we've never done anything in this realm on social. So for me, it was really looking at, okay, how do I help Joe get this started? But then how do we keep that momentum all the way through to the next series? And so thinking for us, how do we keep that momentum going from the first one, which we launched in early January, hosted in April, all the way through the summer to our second one, which we did in coordination with Homecoming and the launch of our capital campaign. And part of that, to also just layer in the madness, is there are a lot of rules about how you can promote content around TEDx. So thank God Joe pays attention to all of that, because even just between the two events and the different licenses we had different abilities to how we could promote and use that content moving forward.
I'm sure working with an organization like TEDx is complicated and complex. And so that's when good communication and good partners like both of you come into play. For some general background for those listening, how long has the program been running in this iteration, and what sort of point are you at in the program? Are you still in that runway period, or have you taken off, for lack of a better term?
So we are still in the runway period. So our first TEDx event was hosted January 31st, 2023. And then our second event was then November 4th, this last
Okay.
November. The first event that we did, we were limited by our TEDx guidelines where we could only have a 100-person audience. We hosted that event. I think we had over 2,800 people that all registered to want to be there in attendance for those 100 seats the first time we did it. And so that then kind of sparked leadership to go, okay, let's open it. And so we did what we needed to do to open it to the next license up, which basically means you can have as many people as you want. We learned a lot this time around. Our audience and 9 a.m. speaker sessions don't gel well. Attendance is low. So that I think is the fun part about this, kind of pilot program, as we've been calling it, is it allows us to kind of experiment and play and engage and kind of go, hey, that didn't work. So the next time around, let's not do an early morning session because that's not what our target audience wants. I think all of our speakers will also appreciate not having to be glammed up, camera ready by 9 a.m. as well. That's kind of where we're at, is that in this 3-year pilot, we've just kind of completed year one. And so I think, looking to what's next, it's a lot of talking, engaging, figuring out what worked, what didn't work, how do we flex. And I think that's the fun part about working with Emily, but also working with our central marketing communications team, is that, our executive director of internal communications, MC, was brilliant to work with in terms of figuring out how do we do the mass emails we were going to do. What's the wording? How do we make it so that way everyone gets what they need to get out of this invitation? And so I think that's where we're incredibly lucky with having our centralized funding, is that in our centralized sponsorship, is that we're able to leverage our central machine while also then working with our larger network across the colleges and their different target audiences and their constituents to really pull them in. And so, yeah, I think we're in that, like, it's happening, but we're still playing and figuring
learning,
it out,
yeah.
which is, in my opinion, my favorite place to live. Because it means we can listen.
Yep.
And I think that's the main piece. We can listen, we can hear the feedback, we can engage, we can shift and be flexible. And I think that's what will continue to make the program even better moving forward.
Right. Yeah, agreed. And it's so important to, especially with new events or trying to bring back old events. Audiences change, tactics change, times people are willing to come to events change. So it's good. It's good learning. So I'm wondering, in terms of selecting the content and subject matter and speakers for that matter, what went into that process, and why are the output of that? Why is that important to the institution?
So all of our content curation is overseen by my partner in crime, Misha Harrison. Her superpower is being able to look across the organization and kind of tap different resources to figure out who's on the cusp of, like, where could this push do the most good in terms of research, in terms of, who's already in the news, or, where do we want to place that? And so she is really the one that is the mastermind behind a lot of our content. So for the first two events, it was all super highly curated by university leadership. So the first event was, here are some people that we think would be great, who are ready to go. And then this last one, like Emily said, we tied it closely with our capital campaign. So it was really looking at the pillars of the capital campaign, talking with deans and, the foundation and leadership to figure that out. And she is the way that she looks at it is truly brilliant. So I can't do it justice talking about it, because it could be an entire episode all unto itself. But I think where it then moves into is once we then have those speakers, it's then really figuring out how do we organize a day of these talks in a way that tells a story. And so the interesting part was we took our lead off of TED itself. So the larger TED conference has, I think, over 12 speaker sessions over the course of like 3 days. And their sessions are titled in terms of, there was one where it was like, oh, I now can't remember because it was so witty, but it was basically like the one where we let loose and have fun, was kind of like one of the titles. And so for us, it was a way of how do we establish for the audience what they're getting into with each of the sessions. So knowing that it was tied to the Capitol campaign and homecoming, the overall theme for the day was the spirit of wonder, tying back into our brand and into, that Capitol campaign. So from there, it was then figuring out, how do we group these speakers in a way that shows the fact that this relates to this and this relates to this. So for example, we put Heather Roper, who is a graphic designer that works with Osiris-Rex, with a bunch of other artists, because there was that tie-in in terms of art meets science and how art and science together makes magic.
Yeah.
And so, we also put AP Duran, who is our Dean for Humanities, in the same session as Dante Loretta, who is, principal investigator for the Osiris-Rex project that just got its sample back, I think a month before we went live with him on stage. And the tie-in of like, Dante actually has a degree in humanities, and this idea of humanities and science and like humanities is more than just your BA in English. And so I think that that's part of the fun of then building the entire day and using that content to our advantage is where do things overlap? What's that story you can build? And I will say a lot of that brain power is my partner in crime, Misha Harrison, because she's truly fantastic at it.
Well, kudos to Misha, because both of those sessions sound like I want to be there. No, that's great. I love that really strategic choices of content and speakers and tying things together that maybe you typically wouldn't think of, like humanities and science, and exploring that kind of subject matter is really cool.
Hey, it's Mallory, Chief Strategist of Enrollify. Why travel far when an exceptional higher ed conference experience awaits from the comfort of your campus or home office? I'm thrilled to announce that every single session at the 2024 Engage Summit will be live streamed. And the best part? Registration is free. Many of your favorite Enrollify creators are presenting. Maya Demishkovich and Jenny Lee Fowler will teach you how to craft an AI-powered social media influencer strategy. Jamie Hunt will help you unlock the AI revolution in your team. And Shane Baglini and Allison Tercio are teaming up to boost your productivity with generative AI. Plan out your dream conference by scoping out the agenda and taking note of the sessions you want to tune in for. Visit engage.element451.com and register yourself and your team for free today. Now, back to the show.
So Emily, from the standpoint of promoting that message, talk about some of the strategic ways that both yourself and your colleagues within the central marketing office went about creating materials, creating messaging around these sessions and these days.
So the idea that we tried to really embrace was that it was an experience and it was an in-person experience, which again, after the pandemic, is not something that immediately came back to everyone.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to really encourage people to be there and experience live. And so we were very careful with the pre-event content in that it was inviting, interesting, increasing that FOMO, especially for the first session. Be here, hear from these experts. That's one of the great perks of higher ed is you have all of these world-changing researchers and authors on your campus that you're learning from. So being able to see them showcase their material and their work in a different light is so impactful for all of the students and the community. So our first foray into it was really looking at that and also determining, okay, who do we want our target audience to be getting people in seats that first round versus, all right, how do we want to share this experience for those that weren't able to attend? And how do we lean on that content and make them feel like they are a part of that experience, even if they weren't able to be there in person?
How did you promote then the actual event to people that weren't there? What, were there special materials created, videos, things of that nature from each of these days and sessions?
Yeah, so the first session, which we had in January of 2023, we were limited in terms of what sort of materials we could use from the talks moving forward. So we relied really heavily on our photography from the event, and using maybe like graphics with really good quotes from it. But we weren't really allowed to lean very heavily on video content itself.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas once we were able to get that second larger license for the November event, we've been able to create those 60-second style vertical videos that people are very familiar with, and are very familiar with seeing from TED, of those just really impactful sections of those larger conversations. I mean, being able to take those 60 seconds and make someone feel engaged enough to then go watch that video is really awesome. And also, again, reinforces that this is what you're seeing here, which is just like what you see on all of those TEDx videos that are all across your screen. So you can be a part of this in the future. So it just really helps lay that groundwork so that when we do our next wave of promotion, it's easier to get people excited because they've seen what comes out of it. It's not that mythical, oh, I mean, like I've seen it, but does it really
Yeah.
happen here?
Yeah, and that really speaks to the importance of that runway that you spoke about. Having limited material the first time, but now having that sort of a revamped kind of stockpile of material, if you will. And it's interesting because this event, I mean, the whole idea behind TED and TEDx is thought leadership, and so you're really able to curate a library of thought leadership clips and videos and materials from the thought leaders at your campus, and that has to have been really valuable.
Well, and I think the other part too is that I think we're extremely lucky in the fact that TED as a whole has opened up. They're really focusing on this idea of impact and how do we make the most impact. And so it's interesting because that's where those 60-second clips kind of came from, was how do we share this and get it out to as many people as
Mm-hmm.
possible now that we've moved into TikTok, Instagram Reels, and this idea of like really bite-sized content. And so I think that's where we've been lucky there. But I think the other piece is exactly what you said. We now have professional, high quality videos that are hosted on the TEDx YouTube channel that we can then share and drop into articles and researchers can use to get their idea out there and to share. And so I think that library long term is going to be great because it's going to give us that portfolio that we can continue to tap into, that the TED audience will continue to discover, months and months and years after these
Mm-hmm.
videos have been
Mm-hmm.
posted, which I think is great.
Yeah, I got to imagine that the lifespan of this content is going to be quite long, and that's exciting for both of you. I'm jealous because, well, I would kill for content like this. But Emily, have you seen any significant impacts in terms of metrics or branding and thought leadership, kind of that the raising the level of awareness around thought leadership at University of Arizona?
We've definitely seen a huge impact on LinkedIn. And that really was very surprising for Joe and I, because we had used LinkedIn in some of our previous projects where we worked together, promotion of commencement or outstanding faculty awards. But the amount of positive reception we saw on LinkedIn is just blowing numbers out of the water. I mean,
Hmm.
when we look at our recap reports for these events, it's really LinkedIn that has the biggest footprint for us, which is not
Interesting.
one that we would have thought. We would have thought it would have been Link or Instagram or something like
Yeah.
that. But we're finding that it's been a really great tool building people's pride in the university, not just getting students excited, but also all of the employees and faculty and staff being able to say, like, look at these are the people that I get to work with and that are helping teach our students. So that's been really awesome for us to be able to
Hmm.
see those numbers and also to see people's enjoyment.
Yeah, I'm surprised about LinkedIn too. I often get into the Instagram reel or TikTok rabbit hole of these thought leadership videos that you can't get out of. So that's interesting to hear that TikTok. But I mean, it does make sense from a sort of point of pride standpoint that the community would be excited about this, and I would have to imagine that prospective students, prospective faculty and staff would be excited about working at a place that has this type of thought leadership exposure.
Yeah, I also think too that as we build up the amount of content and those rabbit holes for people to fall into on our Instagram, we'll see more engagement on Instagram. But right now, LinkedIn has really been where people are engaging and looking for ways to be more involved, i.e., whether that's getting tickets or
Hmm.
um, watching the videos in their full form.
That's really interesting. So, have you seen the audience for the event shift in any way that you may not have been expecting?
I think come back to me after we host the next
Okay,
one next
season
fall,
two.
because I
Yeah.
think that yeah, I think once we get into next fall, I think we'll be able to answer that more
Okay.
clearly. Because I think what we've discovered is needing to build a higher connection to community in general. That yes, students, yes, faculty, but there is also an audience in Tucson for this
Hmm.
content who want to engage with the university as well. And so I think I'll have a better answer for that after series three. I think series one and two, I can't give you a truly data supported
Got it.
answer.
So season two of Breaking Silos, we'll get that information from you.
Yes,
but
perfect.
I mean,
Awesome.
I think it's a great message for any campus leadership listening to this conversation. The need for time, the need for the ability to sort of analyze and learn and see how things are shifting versus reacting right away to the series one or series two, but gathering data and gathering learning is really important. So I'm glad that you all have that opportunity. So moving forward, what is the plan to evolve this event and these series?
Moving forward, we're looking at the next one being in the fall. I think we are looking at doing it once a year instead of twice a year. I think mostly because twice a year is a heavy lift in trying to get it placed strategically around some of the other larger keystone pieces. And then from there, I think it's really doing what we always do, which is going back to what was the guest experience like? How do we make the audience experience even better? Where we come from with the experience team are those touch points where we're in person with our audience. And how do we have them walk away with that glow of, like Emily said, pride and, trust in the institution and build that kind of brand loyalty? And so I think that's where we'll focus in terms of reworking the day is, what's going to be best for our audience here in person. And then of course from there, how do we then begin to translate that experience to the different channels so that way our audience that may not be able to travel to Tucson still feels like they are part of that conversation, part of this thought
Hmm.
leadership, and engaged in that way.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I'll be following along to see how you all evolve because I've seen some of it so far, and I'll of course we'll be following along to see how it evolves. But Emily, from the marketing central office standpoint, and specifically social, going forward, what have you learned so far that will sort of maybe change the way you've done things? What would stay the same?
I think ways to layer in more content leading up where we are able to maybe do a little more with the speakers, but also being careful not to like maybe scoop the talk itself. So how do
Mm.
we add a little bit more of that video component leading up to the event? And then also, again, like, how do we continue to leverage the video component after?
Mhm.
Are there different ways that we should be looking at it? Are there different areas where we should be pushing it more heavily? Just continuing to see where the platforms are and where our audience is, to make sure that we're doing our best to serve them the content that they will benefit from in the places that they're looking for it.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to, an air of intrigue has to be there for these in-person events. You don't want to give too much away, but you want to get people excited about it. So it's a fine line.
Yes.
It is. It's that fine line between who is the person, what are they going to talk about, but not enough that somebody goes, oh, well, you just gave me your talk, so I don't need to go. There's that balancing act that you kind of have to sift through.
So as we close out, this has been a great conversation and a great project to kind of exemplify breaking silos. What would be your advice for others trying to, maybe not TEDx, but something like a large scale event like this that you've learned so far? What would be your advice for others? Joe, I'll start with you.
I think my advice is find a brand to work with. I think that has been the part that has made TEDx so engaging, is that there's a built-in audience that's already there. And so if you're looking at how, like, a lecture series or, a speaker program, there's part of me that goes, find a way to tie it in, because then your audience explodes exponentially. And I think that's one thing that we have been very beneficial with our leadership, is the willingness to say, here's what the research shows. TED is a brand, that's most relevant right now. We can capitalize it on this way, and still then give us the opportunity to play and discover and shift and change and evolve, and not necessarily have that, I gave you the money, what's the ROI right this minute based off this one event. We have a leadership that understands that there is that runway. And so I think that's, the other piece is that if you are looking at building one of these events, is you're talking with leadership, is engage in that overall arching strategy. How it's not just a one and done, but it's actually something that's going to evolve, that's going to develop. And here's how that impact grows and develops. So having that strategy component kind of in place as the foundation, when you approach your leadership, I think can help you get to the next step of then actually making it happen.
Yeah, great advice. It's, again, leadership listening to this. Some of these things take time. So valuable insight there from Joe.
I think from a marketing perspective, just continuing to reach across the different components, and understanding that we all have we're all wearing many hats. We're not just trying to do A, we're trying to do A through Z. And so finding ways that we can help support our colleagues who are helping to support us. So finding those ways that we can be more proactive in sharing what our schedule is, so that they know where they can layer in their content or what that looks like. Or, hey, we've got this covered. Here's a better place for you to focus your resources. So when we talk about things that we might want to do leading up, we've got this covered. We'll do the fancy photo shoots and the speaker graphics. Here are some ways that maybe you can engage your speaker on your channels or engage your audience with this content. So just finding ways where you can give them room to express their own creativity. They know their own audience best, but also ways that they can tie into that bigger picture and be a part of the big event.
Yeah, I love that. And also I love what you both said earlier about giving people tools and things that they can use that kind of takes that mental burden off of them is really helpful. Well, this has been a great conversation. I really looking forward to seeing how this evolves over the next couple of years. If listeners want to learn more, you can visit TEDx.Arizona.edu. Emily and Joe, thank you both so much for being with me.
Thank you, Shane. This was so much fun.
Thank you for having us. It was a blast.
Breaking Silos is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry best as your host. Learn from Dave Cabilds, Jenny Lee Fowler, Eddie Francis, and many more of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.